Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Travis King at Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Jeff Platon, VP of Marketing at View Inc. Jeff, what is going on, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Travis. A lot's going on in the world of marketing. I think it's probably undergone the most change in the last 3 to 5 years than it has in the last 50.
Oh, I totally understand and resonate with that. We were just talking about that a little bit before, and I'm super excited because today you're going to be sharing with us customer type journey mapping. And before we get into that, though, I'd love for you quickly to share with listeners a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at View are up to these days.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong marketer. I've been a leader in marketing for the last 20 years, and I really enjoy, to me, it's the best job in any company, but especially here at View. View's one of those very unique few companies that is literally changing the world. And we're 11-year-old startup. Raised a little over $2 billion in capital. It's a capital-intensive business that we run. But our first product was building a smart window. And think of that as transition sunglasses for buildings that eliminates the heat and glare that makes you uncomfortable in a building and really provides an optimal environment for the people inside. The journey that we've been on has been a pretty spectacular. We've doubled revenues every year for the last 5 years of our 11-year journey. And I think more importantly, we're really starting to see the larger marketplace really appreciate the fact of wellness being that key objective that people are trying to design into building spaces for people. And, our journey includes not just stopping at that smart window, but using this smart building platform now because every window is IP addressable. It's got its own cloud connected network infrastructure and power, and it allows us to put a whole suite of new applications on top of that smart building platform in the future, really making a building as an operating system kind of strategy.
I love that. That's super intriguing and interesting. Because now it's taking the actual world and changing it through Windows. And like you said, the sunglasses effect to Windows and building an operating system. That's super exciting and impressive. Really love that. So awesome. And thanks so much for sharing that context and update for us, Jeff, to give people, a better understanding of your background. So without further ado, let's dive into the show.
All right.
So when it comes to customer type journey mapping, could you tell us a little bit about, how that works, like what that process looks like or what it even is?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift has been the movement from customers really directing the majority of their own customer journey, unaided by sales or any contact with companies. In the digital age, with information being widely available and easily attainable by customers, even in the B2B space, more than 50% of that customer journey is going to be self-directed. So you've got to change the way you think to be more of a data scientist than an artist in terms of how do you really communicate or provide information, more importantly, for people to educate themselves as they progress along that journey map. And that forces you to be much more specific and detailed about profiles and firmographics, demographics, so you deeply understand a customer type, and then break that down in the journey steps of awareness, interest, and consideration, and build specific content for those specific journey steps of each and every customer type.
I love that. And would you mind sharing how you've or your team has, broken down some of these customer types across the different stages?
Yeah, for us, it's it's a good example, I think, of the wide disparity you can have in customer types. Our primary decision makers are building owners, and they kind of come in two different flavors for us. Predominantly, it's a developer, real estate investor on one hand, which is the majority, and the owner occupant. Think of that as Fortune 500, large companies like a Google on the other hand. For the developer, they care about return on invested capital. And really everything from a monetary standpoint, they're building projects for 30 to 50 plus years. They want to know that their investment in new technology is going to give them both a return on investment today, but over the long haul. Whereas an owner occupant is trying to build a building space, frankly, that's the most valuable for the people inside, their employees. That's their primary asset. In fact, if you look over the last 40 years, a company's primary asset has shifted from tangible things to people. And that used to be, 15% of a company in 1975. It's almost 90% of a company's book value today is in the intellectual property. So those kind of companies that make the decisions on what they're going to do for a building space really care about making their people more productive. And frankly, it's a tool for recruitment and engagement and attracting people to stay for the long haul. So the point of that disparity between those two customer types simply says you've really got to deeply understand each customer type because they care about different things. And that's where I made the comment about firmographic, demographic profiles that need to be developed so that we can really speak to, I think what I shared with you earlier, Travis, the limbic brain, the part of the brain that doesn't have the ability to speak and communicate, but really focuses on what touches your emotions. And I think most marketers are familiar with or have heard you need to not only touch people's logical part of their decision making process, but their emotional one. And that's really important as you start to get into larger ticket sized opportunities like what we do here at View. We're a relatively small percentage of the overall building, 1.5%, but a building project can easily be $200 million to $2 billion. So they're large decisions, and those decisions need to be made with, how do I do so with the least amount of risk and the most amount of return? So hopefully that gives you the foundation for and the specific details on what I mean by customer type journey mapping.
I love it. And it definitely does. It gives us a very clear picture on how to look at, the different important decision makers and then figuring out how to build content around their journeys that will enable them to be educated. Like you said, if 50% of, customers now are doing this self-directed journey, how can you as an organization enable them to learn when they want to learn and not, through some sort of webinar when you're telling them, hey, come to this thing at this time, versus giving them a piece of content or something that they can watch whenever they want to get educated when they want to get educated.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'll give you a great example. One of the things we've done here at View, historically, people have put valuable information behind a paywall or, a wall that is trying to extract some personally identifiable information so that you know who the person is. And I argue that eliminates the amount of or the percentage of your targeted profile to consume the information. And so you've got to trust that the information that you're developing is relevant enough to be consumed and be less concerned about trying to grab people's email address or heaven forbid their phone number so that you can call them out of the blue and introduce yourself. That's certainly a failed strategy for today.
Imagine it, a spreadsheet filled with rows and rows of your sales enablement assets. You've devoted 2 years to organizing this masterpiece, only for it to stop making sense. This was Chad Trabucco's reality. As the head of sales enablement at Glint, a LinkedIn company, he's responsible for instilling confidence in his sales reps and arming them with the information they need to do their jobs. However, when his glorious spreadsheet became too complex, he realized he needed a new system. That's when Chad turned to Guru. With Guru, the knowledge you need to do your job finds you. Between Guru's web interface, Slack integration, mobile app, and browser extension, teams can easily search for verified knowledge without leaving their workflow. No more siloed or staled information. Guru acts as your single source of truth. For Chad, this meant Glint sales reps were left feeling more confident doing their jobs. See why leading companies like Glint, Shopify, Spotify, Slack, and more are using Guru for their knowledge management needs. Visit b2bgrowth.getguru.com to start your 30-day free trial and discover how knowledge management can empower your revenue teams.
I guess, could you quickly speak to how you are building content through your customer journey, specifically at Vue? Like, what sorts of content are you finding success with?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, taking the old journey steps of awareness, interest, and consideration, and really breaking that down to build content for someone who's never heard of your company. What's the 10 seconds of content that you can put in front of them that will help them understand who you are and what you do, so that they'll be interested to move to the next step. And, people hear that and they say, really, you have 8 to 10 seconds to capture somebody's attention. And in the early part of that journey, the answer is yes. If you're not communicating who you are and what you do in those first 3 to 8 seconds, you've lost the opportunity to gather their interest to move further. And so that really helps you as a marketer be laser focused on building specific content for that specific journey step. And I think that's really important in today's modern marketing disciplines, that people really understand and are intentional about what they're doing.
Got it. So it's about, building that 8 to 10 second, piece of content that captures attention, whether that be across the awareness stage, the interest stage, or consideration stage.
And that's where I said, be intentional. If it's awareness content you're building, you don't have much time. You have to capture people's attention in just a very short period of time. When you're going from, hey, I'm aware of who you are, to now I'm interested, I'll give you an example. At Vue, we do a lot of informational videos in the voice of a customer. And so I know by watching, how much of that video is being viewed, how many people are watching the first 25, the first 50, the first 75% of that video. On average, for us at least, they're watching about 90 seconds out of that video. That's a great example of building content for people who are generally aware but not deeply knowledgeable about what we do, to having them be further interested in building that content in that transition state from awareness to interest, to get them to the point where they're open to considering a conversation with someone, in our case, someone who comes through a warm introduction, to be in the consideration phase. And so those are specific examples of building content for each journey step.
Got it. No, that makes so much sense. And it's definitely a super valuable thing as marketers listening, think about how they're, developing their 2020 marketing strategies and plans. So really love that. One other thought that I just had actually is, when it comes down to, how challenging or how much, lift, if you will, it takes for a team to implement, a customer type journey map. Could you give us some thoughts or some tips to how you guys have gone about that at Vue, and that other marketers can kind of take and potentially implement in their companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple, Travis. You start with leadership, having a good strategy, and then understanding, okay, organizationally, how are we going to organize our you always have limited resources of people and program dollars. How are we going to allocate and apportion that resource pool? And then what skills do you need to both have on your team, but then burst into in terms of partners? I think today's marketer does as much work outside of their team in terms of partners as they do inside. So it's, again, being intentional about who does what, so that, again, that strategy is followed and then measured every step of the way, so that where your experiments are giving you a lot of success, and equally important, where do you not have success, and stop doing those things that are not working.
Got it. And would you say, like, what percentage of your skills are, on team internal of you? And then how much of that do you guys have partners for?
Yeah, we're 40-60 right now. We're 40% of internal, people on our team. And then we burst into partners 60% of the time. I like having the flexibility of program dollars, so that on both sides of the equation, if we're having a lot of success, we've got the flexibility to move very quickly to do more of what's working. And equally important, we can stop doing what's not working without having to adjust headcount, which can be a very expensive proposition as you try to hire new skill sets and onboard them and bring them into the team.
Got it. No, that's super helpful and valuable. Thank you. And as we wrap up, Jeff, I'm curious to know, because B2B growth has always been about highlighting the tactics and strategies B2B leaders can apply to their own teams in order to achieve explosive growth. So I'd love to hear from you, Jeff. What's a new sales or marketing strategy your team is currently trying or thinking about in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's surprisingly using affinity profiles from Google on search advertising to do micro-targeting. So we're targeting specific affinity profiles in specific regions for specific companies that are on our target list, where I can put content in front of people I know are in my sales partner pipeline that can help them progress the customer from especially awareness to interest by putting specific content and using specific, phraseology and time of day, etc., to have very effective micro-targeting outcomes.
Love that. I can't wait to, catch up with you and see how the results you guys are driving, because I think that's a super unique and interesting way that I actually don't hear very often, and definitely something that's leading, the charge when it comes to being innovative with how you're creating your marketing strategies.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Of course. And so, Jeff, this has been such a great conversation. If listeners want to stay connected with you or follow up to ask any questions on some of the stuff that you shared, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. I'm easily approachable, and you can reach me at Jeff, Jeff, Platon, Platon, @view.com.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff. We really appreciate you being on the show today.
All right. Thank you, Travis.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.